My name is Jason Miller. I'm 36 years old, and for the past decade, I've worked as a network manager for a major insurance company based in Denver, Colorado. My job isn't just about fixing problems, it's about preventing them. I pride myself on being proactive, logical, and level-headed, qualities that serve me well in both my professional and personal life. Or so I thought. For years, I applied my problem-solving skills to everything: work, family, even the minor inconveniences of daily life. If something broke, I fixed it. If there was a risk, I mitigated it. To me, everything had a logical order, and with enough forethought, disaster could always be avoided. This approach worked for a long time. It kept my world running smoothly, just like the networks I managed. But life, as I've learned, isn't a network. It doesn't always respond to logic or careful planning. And sometimes, the problems you don't see coming are the ones that shake you to your core. It all began last June during what should have been a straightforward family trip to my wife Evelyn's hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. Evelyn and I had been married for 14 years, and we had built what I thought was a stable, happy life together. We had 2 wonderful children, Mia 9 and Ben 7. Evelyn, a dedicated teacher, had a way of balancing our chaotic family life with grace, and I always admired her for it. So, when she suggested we drive down to Lexington for her cousin's wedding, I didn't think twice. It was a chance for Evelyn to reconnect with her family, for the kids to spend time with their grandparents, and for me to enjoy a brief respite from work. I even looked forward to meeting Evelyn's old friends and hearing stories about her younger years. Stories I'd heard in bits and pieces over the years, but never fully pieced together. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention to those stories. Evelyn's high school years seemed like a different world, filled with names and faces I didn't know, experiences I couldn't share, and, apparently, unresolved connections I never imagined could surface after all this time. When we arrived in Lexington, the wedding was a grand affair, full of laughter and nostalgia. Evelyn was in her element, catching up with relatives and friends she hadn't seen in years. I spent most of the evening with our kids, enjoying their antics and taking mental snapshots of their joy. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. That night, Evelyn ran into Marcus Reed, an old high school friend. He was charming, confident, and instantly comfortable around her in a way that caught my attention. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we all have old friends. But as the evening progressed, I noticed subtle changes in Evelyn. Her laughter lingered a little longer, her eyes sparkled a little brighter, and her stories flowed with an ease I hadn't seen in years. I dismissed it at the time. I told myself it was just the excitement of reconnecting with someone from her past. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who saw danger in every friendly smile. But a small seed of doubt was planted that night, and as the days unfolded, it grew. I didn't realize it at the time, but that trip to Lexington marked the beginning of a journey that would test everything I thought I knew about myself, my marriage, and the woman I loved. Looking back, I wonder, was there something I could have done differently? Could I have prevented what was to come? Or was this a lesson I was destined to learn the hard way? For now, let me take you back to that night in Lexington, where Marcus Reed re-entered Evelyn's life and set mine on a path I never expected. The wedding was everything you'd expect from a tight-knit Southern family. Big, loud, and filled with a mix of nostalgia and celebration. Evelyn, my wife, was in her element. She had grown up in Lexington, and this was her world. Familiar faces, shared stories, and the kind of easy camaraderie that comes from knowing someone your entire life. I felt like an outsider, but I didn't mind. I enjoyed watching Evelyn in her natural habitat, surrounded by her people. Our kids, Mia and Ben, were having the time of their lives, being doted on by their grandparents and running around with cousins they rarely saw. For once, I didn't have to be the guy solving everyone's problems. I could just be a spectator. That is, until Marcus Reed entered the picture. It happened after the ceremony, during the reception. Evelyn and I were at a table with some of her family laughing about old stories when a man approached. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with the ease of someone who knew he belonged. Evelyn's face lit up when she saw him. "Marcus," she exclaimed, standing up to hug him. The name didn't register with me right away. I assumed he was another one of her cousins or maybe a family friend. But the hug lingered a bit longer than I expected, and when she pulled back, her smile was warmer than I'd seen in a while. "Jason, this is Marcus Reed," Evelyn said, turning to me. "We went to high school together." I stood up and shook his hand, sizing him up as I did. He looked like someone who took care of himself. Broad shoulders, neatly trimmed beard, and a polished appearance that suggested he was used to making an impression. He smiled at me, but there was something in his eyes I didn't like. Maybe it was confidence. Or maybe it was recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when a man looks at another man's wife and remembers something she'd probably prefer he didn't. "Good to meet you, Jason," he said. His tone was friendly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was evaluating me just as much as I was him. As the night went on, I kept an eye on Marcus. He and Evelyn fell into an easy rhythm, talking about high school, mutual friends, and old memories. At one point, Evelyn laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. It wasn't the kind of polite laugh you give an old friend. It was genuine, the kind of laugh that comes from a deep connection. I tried to join in the conversation, but it became clear I was the odd one out. The stories they shared were filled with names I didn't recognize, moments I couldn't relate to. I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. As the evening wore on, I started noticing little things. The way Marcus would lean in when Evelyn spoke. The way she'd touch her hair when she laughed. The way their eyes would linger on each other just a moment too long. None of it was overt, and I told myself I was overthinking it. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder, was this just two old friends catching up? Or was there something more? When the band started playing, Evelyn and Marcus disappeared from the table. I tried to convince myself it was no big deal. Maybe they'd run into another friend, or maybe Evelyn had gone to the restroom. But when 20 minutes passed, I started to feel uneasy. Eventually, Evelyn returned, her face flushed and her smile bright. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding into her seat. "Marcus and I ran into some friends from high school." "Sounds like you're having a great time," I said, keeping my tone light. She didn't seem to notice the edge in my voice, or if she did, she ignored it. "Yeah," she replied, her smile softening. "It's just been so long since I've seen everyone. I forgot how much I missed this." That night, as we drove back to her parents' house, I couldn't stop myself from asking. "So, Marcus seems interesting. You guys were close in high school?" Evelyn glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, we were friends. He was in my group, you know. We all hung out together." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. She was being careful, choosing her words deliberately. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that people are only careful when they have something to hide. That was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. I didn't know it yet, but Marcus Reed wasn't just a figure from Evelyn's past. He was about to become a very real presence in our lives, and not in a way I was prepared for. I'm not the kind of man who gets jealous easily. Evelyn has always been trustworthy, and I've never had a reason to doubt her. But after that night at the wedding, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the way she laughed with Marcus or the way their conversation flowed so effortlessly. It was a feeling, a subtle undercurrent that I couldn't quite put into words. Call it instinct or maybe paranoia, but I couldn't shake it. When we returned to Denver, I tried to push the wedding out of my mind. Life went back to normal, or at least it seemed to. Evelyn was her usual self, taking care of the kids, managing her work, and going about her daily routine. But every now and then, I'd catch her staring off into space, her lips curving into a faint smile, as if she were replaying a memory. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, but I stopped myself. I told myself I was being ridiculous. And then the call came. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in the garage sharpening the lawnmower blade. Evelyn had gone out to run errands, leaving Mia and Ben playing upstairs. I had just finished putting the tools away when the phone rang. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about answering, but something made me pause. I decided to let Mia or Ben pick it up. Hello? I heard Mia's voice. There was a pause, then a man's voice. Hi, this is Marcus Reed. Is your mom home? Marcus. I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the workbench. Why was he calling Evelyn? No, she's not home, Mia said politely. Can I take a message? Yes, Marcus replied. Just let her know I called. I'll try her again later. I stepped out of the garage just in time to see Mia hang up the phone. Who was that? I asked, trying to sound casual. A man named Marcus, she said, looking up at me. He said he's an old friend of Mom's. My stomach clenched. I managed a nod and muttered, Thanks, sweetheart, before heading back into the garage. My mind was spinning. Why would Marcus call Evelyn? They hadn't spoken in years. At least, that's what I assumed. And now, out of the blue, he was reaching out? That evening, Evelyn came home, and I waited for her to mention the call. She didn't. As we sat down for dinner, I casually brought it up. Marcus called today, I said, keeping my tone light. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, but only for a split second. Oh? What did he say? He said he'd call back later, I replied, watching her closely. Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. That's nice of him. I haven't talked to him in years, probably just catching up. Her explanation seemed reasonable, but her body language told a different story. She avoided my gaze, focusing intently on her plate. And when the phone rang at exactly 8 p.m., she excused herself to answer it in the next room. I didn't follow her, but I couldn't stop myself from listening. The conversation was muffled, but I caught snippets. Laughter, familiar tones, and something about dancing. My jaw tightened. Dancing? When Evelyn returned, she acted as if nothing had happened. She sat next to me on the couch, curled up with her book, and smiled as if the phone call hadn't just set my heart racing with questions. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. Who was Marcus Reed to Evelyn? Was he just an old friend, or was there something more? My rational side told me to let it go, to trust her. But another part of me, the part that had noticed the way she lit up when she talked to him at the wedding, couldn't ignore the signs. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I went into Evelyn's closet and pulled out a box of her old keepsakes. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know. Inside, I found letters, cards, and mementos from our years together. But what caught my eye was her high school yearbook. I flipped through the pages until I found Marcus's photo. Next to it, he had written a note to Evelyn. My dear Evelyn, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. I'll never forget what we shared, and I'll always love you. My hands shook as I closed the book and returned it to the box. I told myself it was just a relic from her past, but the words stuck with me. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was reading too much into things. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Marcus Reed wasn't done with Evelyn, and whether she realized it or not, he wasn't done with me either. By Monday, my thoughts were a tangled mess of suspicion and self-doubt. Evelyn went about her routine as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was still looming over us. He hadn't just disappeared after that phone call. There was an air of something unresolved, like a storm waiting to break. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia has a way of burrowing into your mind and taking root. The more I tried to dismiss it, the more it gnawed at me. I decided I needed answers. Not later, not when things unraveled further. Now. That evening, after Evelyn went to bed, I stayed downstairs under the pretense of finishing some work. Instead, I logged into her email account. I knew it was wrong, and the guilt hit me immediately, but I couldn't stop myself. Her password was one I knew, our daughter's initials combined with her birth date. I told myself it was a necessary evil, that I just needed to confirm there was nothing going on. The inbox was mostly innocent. Emails from her colleagues, school updates from Mia and Ben, and promotional junk from stores. I exhaled, starting to feel foolish for doubting her. But just as I was about to log out, a message caught my eye. The subject line read, "Looking forward to Tuesday." It was from Marcus Reed. My heart raced as I clicked on the email. "Hi, Evelyn. I'll be in Denver this week for work. Let's grab dinner Tuesday night. It'll be great to catch up properly, just you and me. Let me know what time works for you. Marcus." I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. He was coming to Denver, for dinner, with Evelyn, alone. I checked the sent folder next. Her reply was short and to the point. "Tuesday works. Dinner sounds great, but I can't stay too long." No exclamation marks, no enthusiasm. It was as casual as could be. But even in its simplicity, it left me uneasy. Why didn't she mention this to me? Why agree to a private dinner at all? I closed the email and sat there, staring blankly at the screen. My logical side tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just wanted to catch up. Maybe she didn't think it was a big deal. But my gut told me otherwise. The next day, I watched Evelyn closely. She seemed calm, even cheerful. She laughed with the kids, kissed me goodbye as I left for work, and texted me during the day about the usual things. Grocery lists, reminders for parent-teacher meetings, and what we should have for dinner. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she was hiding anything. But that evening, as she prepared dinner, I noticed a slight change. She seemed distracted, her movements a little more deliberate. When I asked if something was on her mind, she brushed it off with a smile. "Just a long day," she said, her voice light. After dinner, she lingered on her phone longer than usual. I wanted to ask if it was Marcus she was messaging, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to tip my hand just yet. Tuesday arrived, and my anxiety was at an all-time high. Evelyn left the house early, dressed a little more carefully than usual. When I asked if she had plans after work, she hesitated just a second too long. "I'm meeting a friend for dinner," she said. I didn't press her. I wanted to, but I held back. Instead, I stayed late at the office, pretending to catch up on work while obsessively checking her email. Sure enough, there it was. "Meet me at the Artisan at 7 o'clock. Can't wait to see you. Marcus." I debated whether to confront her before she left, or wait and see what happened. Ultimately, I chose the latter. I needed to know how far this would go. When I got home, Evelyn was gone, and the kids were already in bed. I sat in the living room, the silence pressing down on me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she already with Marcus? Were they laughing over dinner? Did he still have that smug, confident look he'd worn at the wedding? I checked the time. It was 7:45. If I hurried, I could catch them. Grabbing my keys, I left the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I'd do when I saw them, but one thing was clear. I couldn't sit back and let this unfold without answers. As I drove to the restaurant, a storm of emotions raged inside me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and the tiniest flicker of hope. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it really was just dinner. But deep down, I knew the truth. Marcus wasn't in Denver for business. He was here for Evelyn, and I was about to find out just how far he was willing to go to take her from me. As I pulled into the parking lot of the Artisan, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My grip on the steering wheel was tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I'd never felt anything like this before. A mix of anger, betrayal, and dread. A part of me hoped I was wrong, that I'd walk in and find Evelyn having an innocent meal with an old friend. But another part of me, the part that had been eating away at me for days, knew better. The restaurant's warm glow spilled into the evening as I approached the entrance. I hesitated for a moment, gathering myself before stepping inside. The hostess greeted me with a bright smile, but I barely acknowledged her. My eyes scanned the dining area, moving past couples and groups until I found them. There they were, tucked into a corner table, deep in conversation. Evelyn sat across from Marcus, her expression a mix of laughter and attentiveness. She looked beautiful. Too beautiful. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore a dress I hadn't seen in months, one that always caught my attention. My chest tightened as I realized she hadn't dressed up like that for me in a long time. Marcus leaned forward, his body language intimate. His hand rested on the table just inches from hers. Evelyn laughed at something he said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. For a moment, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. This wasn't just a casual dinner between old friends. This was something else entirely. I forced myself to take a deep breath, steadying the storm inside me. My logical side screamed at me to walk away, to wait for Evelyn to come home and confront her there. But I couldn't. I couldn't let this continue for another second. I approached the table slowly, my footsteps heavy on the polished floor. Evelyn saw me first. Her smile froze, and her eyes widened in shock. Marcus turned, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to something closer to irritation. "Jason," Evelyn said, her voice shaky. She sat back, her hands pulling away from the table like a guilty child caught in the act. "Evening," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fire roaring inside me. I pulled out the empty chair next to Evelyn and sat down. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Marcus recovered quickly, flashing me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jason, right? Nice to see you again." I ignored him, focusing on Evelyn. "So, this is the friend you mentioned," I said, my tone calm but edged with something darker. "Funny how you forgot to mention his name." Evelyn flushed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Jason, I'd love to hear what's so funny," I interrupted, cutting her off. "You seem to be having a great time." Marcus cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair. "Look, Jason, I don't want any trouble. Evelyn and I are just catching up. Old friends, nothing more." "Old friends," I repeated, turning to him. My voice was ice. "Tell me, Marcus, do you make a habit of asking your married friends out for private dinners?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. "Or is this just a special occasion? Maybe a little trip down memory lane?" "Jason, stop," Evelyn said, her voice rising slightly. "It's not what you think." "Then enlighten me," I said, shifting my gaze back to her. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think." Evelyn took a deep breath, her hands still trembling. "Marcus reached out after the wedding. He wanted to catch up, to talk about old times. That's all this is. Just dinner. Nothing more." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Then why hide it? Why not tell me the truth?" She hesitated, and in that moment, I knew the answer. She hadn't told me because she knew how it would look. She knew it was wrong, even if she wouldn't admit it out loud. "Jason," Marcus began, his voice smooth but tinged with defensiveness. "I think you're overreacting. Evelyn and I—" "Don't," I said sharply, cutting him off. "Don't speak to me like I'm an idiot. I know exactly what you're doing." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. I turned back to Evelyn. "You have a choice to make," I said, my voice low but firm. "You can stay here and continue, whatever this is. Or you can come home with me and we can figure out how to fix this mess." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Marcus, then back at me, her face a mix of guilt and anguish. For a moment, I thought she might stay. I thought she might choose him. But then she stood, grabbing her purse. "Let's go," she whispered. I stood as well, turning to Marcus. "Stay away from my wife," I said coldly. If you ever contact her again, you'll regret it. Marcus didn't respond, his smug confidence replaced with something closer to fear. I didn't wait for him to say anything. I placed my hand on Evelyn's lower back and guided her out of the restaurant, leaving him alone at the table. The drive home was silent, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to explode, to demand answers, but I held it in. Whatever had happened tonight, it wasn't over, not by a long shot. And I wasn't sure if our marriage would survive it. The tension in the car on the drive home was unbearable. Evelyn sat silently, staring out of the window, her hands clutched tightly around her purse. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. My thoughts churned, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a desperate need for answers. When we finally pulled into the driveway, I turned off the engine but made no move to get out. Evelyn didn't either. The silence between us stretched, heavy and oppressive. I wanted her to say something, anything, to explain what had just happened. But she didn't. I broke the silence. Evelyn, what the hell was that? She turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. Jason, No. I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. No excuses, no half-truths. I want the whole story, and I want it now. Evelyn inhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling. I didn't think it was a big deal, she began softly. Marcus and we were close in high school. He reached out after the wedding, and I thought it would be nice to catch up. That's all it was supposed to be. Supposed to be? I echoed bitterly. Do you always dress up like that for a friendly dinner? She flinched at my tone. I didn't think it through, she admitted. I was flattered when he asked. I liked the idea of reconnecting with someone from my past. But I swear, Jason, I didn't mean for it to... To what? I snapped. To look like you were on a date? To make me feel like an idiot? To jeopardize everything we've built together? Her tears started to fall then, silent and slow. I made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible mistake. I got out of the car, slamming the door behind me, and stormed toward the house. Evelyn followed, her footsteps hesitant. Once inside, I turned to face her, my frustration boiling over. Do you have any idea what this feels like? I asked, my voice shaking. To see you sitting there with him, laughing, looking like you're in your element? To know you lied to me to make it happen? I didn't lie, she said weakly. Don't you dare, I snapped. You told me you were meeting a friend. That's a lie by omission, Evelyn, and you know it. She wiped her tears away, her expression shifting from guilt to defiance. I didn't think you'd understand. Marcus is an old friend, Jason. That's all he is. Then why didn't you tell me the truth? I demanded. Why didn't you invite me to join you? If it was so innocent, why hide it? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she looked away, her silence speaking volumes. I shook my head, pacing the living room. Do you know what it was like for me these past few days? Wondering if there was something going on? Questioning everything I thought I knew about us? And then tonight, seeing you there with him? God, Evelyn, I didn't want to believe it. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice trembling. I wasn't going to do anything, Jason. I wasn't. Maybe not tonight, I shot back. But where does it stop? The next dinner? A drink after work? A harmless trip down memory lane? Marcus didn't come to Denver just to catch up, Evelyn. You know that. And deep down, I think you wanted the attention. She gasped, her face crumpling. But I wasn't done. You're not stupid, I continued, my voice harsh. You knew exactly what Marcus wanted when he called you. And instead of shutting it down, you encouraged it. Her sobs broke then, her hands covering her face. I was wrong, she choked out. I was wrong, Jason. I see that now. Please, please believe me. I stared at her, torn between anger and heartbreak. I wanted to forgive her, to move past this, but the hurt was too fresh. "You don't get to cry your way out of this," I said coldly. "I need time, Evelyn. I need space to figure out if I can trust you again." She nodded, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. "I'll prove to you that you can trust me. Please, Jason, don't give up on us." I turned away, my jaw clenched, and headed upstairs without another word. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Evelyn cried softly in the guest room. The love we had built over the years felt fragile, like a house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. In the darkness, I made a decision. I wouldn't walk away, not yet. But Evelyn needed to understand just how close she had come to losing me. Trust wasn't something she could beg for. She would have to earn it. And I would have to decide if I was willing to give her that chance. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. I woke up alone in our bedroom, the guest room door firmly shut as I passed it on my way downstairs. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind, each detail cutting deeper. Evelyn's tears, her shaky apologies, her weak explanations. They weren't enough. I needed more than words. I needed the truth, and I needed to be sure of her intentions moving forward. As I poured my coffee, Evelyn appeared at the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept. Neither had I, but I refused to let her see the turmoil I felt. "Morning," she said softly. I didn't respond, sipping my coffee in silence. She hesitated, then sat down across from me at the kitchen table. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the tension between us heavy. "Jason," she began, her voice trembling. "I meant what I said last night. I know I hurt you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Please tell me how to fix this." I set my mug down and leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Evelyn, this isn't something you can fix with a few apologies and promises. What you did, what you almost did, has shaken everything I thought I knew about us. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I'm not sure where to start." Her eyes filled with tears, but I continued. "If we're going to move past this, I need complete honesty from you. No more lies, no more omissions. I need to know why you agreed to see Marcus, why you hid it from me, and what you were hoping to get out of it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You deserve the truth," she said quietly. "I didn't tell you about Marcus because I didn't want to upset you. I knew how it would look, but I didn't think it would be a big deal. I thought I could handle it." "Handle it?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Evelyn, he wasn't there for a friendly catch-up. He was there to see if he still had a chance with you, and you gave him that chance." "I know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I see that now, but I wasn't thinking about it that way. I liked the attention, Jason. I've been feeling so invisible lately. Between work, the kids, and everything else, I guess I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone outside of all that." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You matter to me," I said, my voice raw. "You've always mattered to me. Why couldn't you come to me instead of him?" "I don't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was stupid and selfish, and I hate myself for it. Please, Jason, believe me when I say I never meant to hurt you." I sat back, running a hand through my hair. "Evelyn, this isn't just about you and Marcus. This is about us. Somewhere along the way, we lost something, and instead of working to find it together, you went looking for it elsewhere." She nodded, her sobs quieting. "I know, and I want to fix it. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, Jason." I swear I stared at her, weighing her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take her at face value and move forward. But another part of me, the part that had seen her sitting across from Marcus, laughing and smiling like nothing else mattered, wasn't so sure. "I need time," I said finally. I need to process everything and figure out where we go from here. But there's one thing I need from you right now. Anything, she said, her voice filled with desperation. Cut all contact with Marcus, I said firmly. No emails, no texts, no calls. If he tries to reach out, you tell me immediately. I need to know that he's out of the picture. She nodded without hesitation. Done. I'll delete his number, block his email, whatever it takes. I studied her face, searching for any sign of hesitation or deceit. But all I saw was guilt and a glimmer of determination. She seemed sincere, but I knew actions would speak louder than words. That day, I began formulating a plan. Not to catch Evelyn in another lie, but to rebuild what had been broken. It would take time, effort, and painful honesty. But if we were both willing to put in the work, there was a chance we could come out stronger on the other side. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Evelyn approached me in the living room. She handed me her phone, her email account open on the screen. I blocked him, she said simply, and I want you to know I'm committed to us. Whatever you need from me, I'll do it. I nodded, taking the phone and scrolling through her contacts and emails to confirm. She sat quietly, letting me do what I needed to do. When I was satisfied, I handed it back to her. This is a start, I said, but it's just the beginning. She nodded, her expression resolute. I know, and I won't let you down again. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, but it was there, a small light in the darkness. Whether it would grow or fade depended on what came next. But for now, it was enough to keep me going. The weeks following Evelyn's admission were tense but oddly constructive. She had cut all ties with Marcus and had gone out of her way to be transparent about everything. Her whereabouts, her plans, even her emotions. It was clear she was committed to rebuilding my trust, but that didn't mean the process was easy. Trust isn't something you can demand or even rush. It's earned, one small moment at a time. I'd stopped monitoring her emails and calls, partly because she gave me no reason to suspect her anymore, and partly because I was tired of living in a state of constant suspicion. Yet, even as things began to settle, a part of me couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was still something unresolved between us. It was a Friday night, a month after the confrontation at the restaurant, when Evelyn suggested we go out for dinner. She'd arranged for her sister to watch the kids and had made reservations at the very same restaurant where I'd found her with Marcus. The Artisan. Why there? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. She met my gaze, her expression serious. Because I want us to reclaim it. I don't want that place to hold any power over us, Jason. It was a mistake, but it doesn't have to define us. I didn't know how to feel about her reasoning, but I agreed. If this was her way of showing me she was fully committed to moving forward, I wasn't going to stand in the way. We arrived at the Artisan just after 7 p.m., and the hostess led us to a quiet table near the back. Evelyn looked stunning in a deep blue dress, her hair swept up in a way that always made her look effortlessly elegant. For the first time in a long time, I found myself focusing on her beauty rather than the pain we'd been working through. As we ordered drinks, Evelyn reached across the table and took my hand. Jason, I know this hasn't been easy for you, or for us, but I'm so grateful you've given me this chance. I don't take it lightly. I nodded, squeezing her hand. I'm still here because I believe in us, Evelyn. But I won't lie. Some days are harder than others. Her eyes filled with emotion, but she didn't look away. I know, and I'll keep doing whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm all in. Our dinner was surprisingly enjoyable. We talked about the kids, reminisced about old memories, and even laughed about how awkward our first date had been all those years ago. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the early days of our relationship, before life and its complexities had taken their toll. But just as I began to relax, I saw a familiar face enter the restaurant. Marcus. My body tensed immediately, my grip on the fork tightening. He hadn't seen us yet, but the sight of him was enough to bring back all the anger and betrayal I thought I'd moved past. Evelyn noticed the shift in my demeanor. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded toward the entrance. Marcus just walked in. Her face went pale, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she reached for my hand again, her grip firm. "Jason, look at me." I did, my jaw clenched. "He doesn't matter," she said softly. "Not to me, not to us. Let him walk in, let him sit down. I don't care. All I care about is you." Her words were sincere, but I couldn't help the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. I wanted to confront him, to make it clear that he had no place in our lives. But Evelyn's calmness grounded me. She wasn't running, wasn't hiding. She was facing this moment head on, and that meant more to me than she probably realized. Marcus spotted us then, his eyes widening briefly before he quickly looked away and found a seat on the opposite side of the restaurant. He didn't approach us, didn't try to make eye contact again. For the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. We finished our meal without incident, and as we left the restaurant, I realized something had shifted. Seeing Marcus hadn't reopened old wounds, it had closed them. I didn't care about him anymore. He was irrelevant, a footnote in our story. What mattered was Evelyn, standing beside me, holding my hand tightly as if to say, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, as we lay in bed, Evelyn turned to me. "Jason," she whispered, "I need you to know something." "What's that?" I asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I've never loved anyone the way I love you. Not Marcus, not anyone. I almost let my insecurities ruin that, but I won't ever make that mistake again." Her words sank in, settling the last of my doubts. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. "Then let's move forward," I said, my voice steady. "No more looking back." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. No more looking back. And as we fell asleep that night, I knew we were finally on the path to healing. It wouldn't be perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours, together.